Do you know what Splash Mountain is named after? Some of you might be quick to answer with Song of the South. You're wrong. Okay, that's sort of a trick question because technically speaking, Splash Mountain is based on the Disney classic film Song of the South. However, it isn't named after it. You see, back in the early 80s, Marty Sklar, the famous Imagineer, was trying to work on a new log flume ride that would bring some more traffic to Frontierland over in Disneyland, and they eventually decided to base it off of the Disney classic film Song of the South. That's where you get characters like Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit and things like that. However, it wasn't originally called Splash Mountain. The ride was originally going to be named after one of the songs that was prominently used in the attraction itself, which was Zip-a-dee-doo-da. So the ride was going to be called Zip-a-dee River Run. However, CEO at the time, Michael Eisner, had other plans. You see, he wanted to take that attraction and use it to sort of cross-promote a live-action film directed by Ron Howard that Disney was putting out under its Touchetone Films label. It was about a mermaid who came onto land and starred Daryl, Hannah, and Tom Hanks, and it was called Splash. The Imagineers didn't really want to go with it, but the name sort of stuck, and at the same time they decided to take the attraction and make it another one of the famous mountains. And that's how we got Splash Mountain. Of course, that's not the only example of a name changing over at Disney World. In fact, it's happened plenty of times, even a few times before the parks themselves opened. You see, back before Disney World opened, they were building what was considered Phase 1 of Disney World. That included the Magic Kingdom, the Contemporary Resort, the campgrounds, and then the Polynesian Hotel. They were all getting built at the same time, and like many construction projects, not just within Disney, but outside of Disney as well, these projects had working names. And the working name for one of the hotels that would be connected via monorail to the Magic Kingdom was the Contemporary Hotel. It was meant to be, as the working title suggested, a contemporary hotel. Towards the end of construction, Disney had renamed it to the Tempo Bay Hotel. They thought it was a pretty clever name. Tempo was sort of a shortened version of contemporary, Bay because it was actually on Bay Lake, and hotel because it was a hotel. However, there was one person at Disney who didn't agree, and that was Roy Disney. As the story goes, Roy was having lunch one day in Florida, and he saw all the paperwork and materials for this Tempo Bay Hotel, and he was very confused. He had never heard of it before. He didn't know what it was, and that's when hotel planner John Curry explained the name change to him and why they had done it. He didn't like it. He said, quote, "I just don't like it. I like contemporary. I like names that are simple and say what they are. The other name is phony and plastic." And that's all it took. Within 1 week, all the paperwork had been resubmitted, and the Tempo Bay Hotel had been renamed back to the Contemporary Resort, which we all know and love today and ride the monorail through. Did you also know that Epcot had more than one name? It had more than two names. It actually had more than three names. That's right, Epcot's had its name changed 3 times. Now, for those who might be too young to remember, it originally opened as Epcot Center. Epcot was spelled with all caps because at that point, Epcot still stood for the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. The word center was added on there because it was supposed to represent the center of what would eventually become Epcot the City, Walt's real dream. The story would eventually change, and the center would eventually mean to represent that Epcot was the center of the values and the ideas that Walt's City of the future were striving for. In 1994, Epcot Center saw its first name change, and it was changed to Epcot 94. You see, the naming convention was meant to sort of mimic the World's Fair, which Epcot itself was sort of mimicking. You had your country pavilions over in World Showcase, and you had these technology and company-sponsored pavilions over in Future World. So they thought the naming convention would sort of represent that, sort of the way that the World Expos had their years tacked on at the end. And so as a result, in 1994, it was Epcot 94, and then in 1995, the name was changed again to Epcot 95. I guess they didn't really want to keep changing all the signs and maps because by 1996, they dropped the naming convention and just renamed it to what we know it as today, which is just Epcot. Just as a personal aside, my favorite Epcot Center ride has to be Century 3. You see, one of the sponsored pavilions over in Future World was going to be sponsored by General Electric. It was going to be a slow-moving attraction that showed us the world of the future, what it could be in different forms, whether it was in space or under the water or over in the deserts. And it was called Century 3 because it was meant to represent America's third century. The idea was, at one point in the attraction, we would be visiting America during its tricentennial in the future. Of course, the name didn't stick because there was no actual Century 3 attraction to ride. You see, Disney was afraid that international guests wouldn't get the name because it was so specific towards America. So in an effort to give it a more universal name and also a name that stuck with its theming of looking into the future and visiting the future and probing into the future, it was given the name Future Probe. That one didn't last very long either because it sounded too medical and cold and kind of creepy. It was given one more name. It was a name that represented how the attraction looked towards the horizon of our future, no matter where it was, and that is how we got the classic attraction, Horizons. And of course, I wanted to save the best for last. In 1966, Walt Disney put out his final film, which was a film that showcased his plans for the future with all of the land that he secretly purchased in Florida. It was too big to be called Disneyland, and that's why he called it Disney World. It was going to be home to another theme park, an East Coast Disneyland, so to speak, as well as a living, breathing city of the future called Epcot. Unfortunately, Walt never got to see it open. He passed away before they started construction on Disney World, and his older brother, Roy, postponed his own retirement so that he can make sure that his little brother's plans could come to fruition. He was going to stick around until phase 1 of Disney World was completed, which included the theme park and a couple of hotels and the monorail infrastructure. He didn't want to just make sure it opened, though. He wanted to make sure that everybody who visited and enjoyed Disney World, whether it was in the near future or in the far future, remembered the man behind the entire thing, the one who made it all possible, his little brother Walt. And that's why he changed the name of Disney World to Walt Disney World. Now, of course, those aren't the only examples of names that have changed over the years in the Disney parks. It's happened quite a bit. And I would love to hear from you guys. What was your favorite name change? Not just in this video, but throughout the whole history of the parks. Let me know in the comments below, or you can let me know on Twitter. I'm at RobPlays. I want to thank you all for watching. If you want to see more Disney videos just like this, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button. I put out 3 a week. Have a great week. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it because it makes it that much better. And I hope to see you next time on Rob Plays That Game.
How much does it cost to live at Disney World? It's a question a lot of fans have thought about before. You're on a trip, you're ready to go home, but you don't want to. You start thinking about what would it take to stay an extra day, or 2 days, or a week, or a month. And before you know it, you're wondering what would it take to just live at Disney World because you love it so much and you don't want to leave.